Golly, that seems so short, folks. I thought I had more time. Boy, have I got a commute story for you this morning. As the man said, you ain't heard nothing yet. However, my dear friends, before we actually begin that story, I would like us to take a moment. We are looking at the glorious season of gratitude, part 2. And I would like us to take a moment to think of yesterday. Yesterday, many years ago, at the 11th hour, on the 11th day, in the 11th month, a peace armistice was signed in a railway car in a siding in the French countryside. We thought, or rather we hoped, that it would bring peace to the world. Unfortunately, it didn't. And yet, we still have hope. So let us take the next few moments and express within ourselves the gratitude to those who gave their lives in that terrible conflict. We all know that poem, in Flanders Fields, the poppies grow. Between the crosses, row on row. We know the bodies interred there. I am old enough to remember when that day was called Armistice Day. And at 11 o'clock sharp, a whistle blew, every factory whistle in the city blew, and everything came to a halt. Cars stopped in the middle of the street. People stood still on the sidewalk. If you were in a store, the cash drawer remained open, and the hand of the cashier was still. We say thank you to those who gave their lives. And then it became Veterans Day, and we began to celebrate those who served and returned. We are grateful that they returned. We are grateful for those who gave their lives, for those who returned. Very often, they came back alive, but profoundly wounded in body and soul. Let us take this moment and let us see peace, feel peace, believe in peace, and with peaceful hearts say thank you to those who served. In a few seconds of silence. Thank you, God. And so, my dear friends, as we are going into this season of the glorious season of gratitude, part 2, I'm going to ask your indulgence for a moment while I blow my nose. I got here this morning, and the first thing Jackie said to me, as I came through the downstairs door, perfect timing, she said, oh, perfect timing. She had two cups of water in her hand, and she said to me, can you drink out of a cup like this? And I said, does it have water in it? She said, yeah. I said, good, honey, as long as I'm not drinking out of my hand while I'm standing at the podium. Which I thought was a wonderful prelude to gratitude. Then I went to the ladies' room, and I seemed to be suffering, thank God you can't see this on the screen, static electricity and flyaway hair. And she went, aren't we just grateful we have hair? And I went, yes. And we had a discussion about people who have lost their hair. You see, the whole point is we don't see what we can be grateful for. And I had that brought home to me this morning as I drove for the first time in I don't know how many months, all the way from exit 187 Rossonville Road on I-94 to Crooks Road on I-75 at 70 to 75 miles an hour. Yeah. Hey, it's Michigan. We drive like that. You know that. But here's what happened. Just about at Merriman Road, which is the exit for the airport, this sentence popped into my head. Now, I have to tell you, I used to listen to Sunday Edition, but I'm not keen on it because I found it distracting. So now I listen to WRCJ, which is classical music, because basically I am giving my sermon to the center of my steering wheel. In other words, I'm running through it again. And all of a sudden, this sentence went into my head. Gratitude is a two-edged sword. And I went, huh? You don't want to do too much, huh? And take your eyes off the road if you're going that fast. So I was like, huh? And then, huh? And as I'm thinking about it, at 75 miles, you can cover another 2 miles really quickly. There was a gigantic sign, illuminated sign, which said, rediscover it. And I thought, rediscover what? Mm-hmm. And as I got closer, I could see it was advertising something. But I knew that wasn't the answer. And I thought, wow. Spirit really had an interesting approach this morning. Because none of that was what I had intended to put into my lesson for today. Oh yes, I'm talking about gratitude, and I'm talking about it as an aspect of our lives, but it had nothing to do with a two-edged sword. And I'm thinking, a two-edged sword. Okay, when you think of this word, what do you think of? My first thought is a weapon. Because we all read history and we think of a weapon. You want to see two-edged swords, go to a good museum and go to the medieval section. And some of those swords, folks, are really impressive. And I thought, a sword. But a sword is a weapon. And then I thought, think again. Because I've been reading a lot of books on our metaphysics. And my dear friends, I have been telling you, as Reverend Ross has been telling you, that the consciousness with which we live our lives is key to the quality of the experience that we have of our lives. And I just, when Jackie said, we need and I went, oh, gosh, golly, I don't know, I'm driving. See what you've got. I didn't want to hold her up, and I said, I'm driving. Find some. She said, what about count your blessings? And I was like behind her going, no, count your blessings. I mean, that's one of my favorites. That was one of my first ones back in 1978 when I was introduced to Unity. I love that song. I don't care how old it is. I don't care how tacky it might seem. It is foundationally true. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Based on what principle? That which you expand upon expands within your manifestation. So if you're out there going, oh my God, I got static electricity this morning and fly away hair, what am I going to have? More static electricity and more fly away hair, until a wise woman looks at me and said, thank God we have hair. Do you see the possibilities before us and the necessity of our changing our perceptions? Our perceptions. A two-edged sword. So there I am, coming along. I get to the Southfield Freeway. Which, like I said, it was a garage door almost to the parking lot. I did have to get off at Crooks Road, and then but it was fantastic. It added 5 miles, but it took 5 minutes off the driving time. Figured that one out. It took me 55 miles, but I did it in 55 minutes. Don't anybody report me to the cops, okay? I really did not break the speed limit much. Everybody drives 75 on a 70-mile-an-hour road. You know that. A two-edged sword, and I thought, do all swords have two edges? Yes. Some of them have two sharp edges. Some of them have a sharp edge. Some of them have a flatter edge. And I thought, can you use both of them? And I began to think of all the ways that you could use a sword that was not a weapon. You could use it like a machete to cut weeds, grass, something like that. You could use it to, I don't know, pound it in a nail if you had to. It'd be difficult, but with the flat, with the broader side, you could get it in. And I began to see that it was a metaphor. I wasn't thrilled with the metaphor that I saw, and then it made sense. Because what happens to us? What is life? Life, friends, is a series of experiences, some of which we label good, and some of which we label bad. But what if we labeled everything perfection? What if we labeled everything perfection, in that it offered to us the opportunity to be a living, breathing, expressing, individualized expression of God. Now, if you recall a little bit from last week, and in case you didn't hear last week, one of my major points was that in order for us to lead lives of gratitude, we need to understand who we are. And Genesis 1:26 tells us that. And God made humankind in God's image and likeness. The image is spirit, in that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And the likeness is in creativity. We share in the creative energy that is God within us. When you get out of bed in the morning, folks, and you swing your feet over and whatever they hit a carpet or they hit a hardwood floor or they hit the dog, unfortunately, who's sleeping at the end of the bed. I never hit my cat. My cat is right next to me on the bed, so we don't have any problems there. We have already begun to engage in the energy which is our nature, I was thinking about this. And what came to my mind was the wedding feast at Cana. Now remember, what did Jesus say? The Father and I are one. He who has seen me has seen the Father. What he meant by that was, if you've seen me, if you've been looking at me, you have seen principle. You have seen the agent of energy within which you live and move and have your being. Sylvia, you missed your happy birthday hello. So we're going to take a second and say it again. Everybody say happy birthday, Sylvia. Happy birthday, Sylvia. Good. And Max sends his best regards from my house as well. Okay. And those of you know that story. The agency of God, a spiritual being having a human experience. Friends, if the infinite loving energy allowed it, created it to come into your life, how can it possibly be bad? And I know you're immediately going to say to me, okay, what about my friends who have leukemia, my friends who have Parkinson's, my friends whose 401k crashed, and we list our string of terrible, quote unquote, things that have happened. But if we look at them again with the inner eyes of wisdom, what do we see? What happened? What happened? I'm thinking of somebody who was running a not-for-profit agency. I'm not going to identify it because I don't wish to identify the person. And that fund was being funded by people who had the bulk of their wealth in Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme. And the day that crashed, that meant that not-for-profit agency lost its money. And it meant that the person who was the director of that agency probably didn't have a job anymore. And yet it was turned around completely to where the agency not only is even more empowering today than it was back then, ultimately. And I'm thinking of people who I know who are seriously ill. And what has happened as they have allowed themselves to be taken care of by those around them, and what has happened to those who take care of them and their upliftment. It is interesting this morning, and I pulled my angel cards, you know me and the angel cards, the energy in which we are this morning as a community is openness. Openness. And the experience that we have is healing. Now, if you were in class with me last week, you would know that I described healing coming from the Old English word meaning hale, H-A-L-E, meaning whole and healthy. So if we are open to what life offers us, we will find that we are whole enough to process it. Notice I didn't say survive it. I said process it. Surviving is hanging on, gripping the edge of the desk, the edge of the bed, whatever it is. Processing it is standing there or sitting there or lying there and saying, okay, God, what's going on? So when it said gratitude was a two-edged sword, I thought, okay, God, give me more. And it did 2 miles down the road when the big sign said, discover it. And he thought, well, discover what? The ways in which we can approach life. And you remember, because you are all good community students, we are empowered with 12 different powers. We talked about understanding last week, because understanding, and I am wedded to very closely Charles Fillmore's definition of understanding, which is God stands under all. God stands under all, which means all that transpires in the universe has God in it. I know we've had terrible wars, we've had holocausts, we've had nightmares of floods and disasters and earthquakes, and we go, where was God in this? We're even saying that today. Where is God in this? Friends, God is there because we are there. Have we brought ourselves consciously to it? I had a little experience yesterday. I didn't realize that it was going to be an antecedent to what I was going to say today, but they moved the Ypsilanti Farmers Market from the outdoor location to an indoor location, and they're going to do it for about 6 more weeks. And I was like thrilled because I do want to support my community-supported agriculture. Besides, there's a baker there that makes the best sourdough bread you ever had in your life. And so I got up really early and I went to the farmer's market. Then I thought, okay, I'm starving to death and I need a cup of coffee. And I went to my local Panera. And as I walked up to the door, I saw 2 people coming toward me. A woman who was obviously a mom, and the fellow accompanying her, I'm guessing, was a teenage son. And I opened the door really wide and stepped aside so that they could walk through. And Mom looked at me and said, oh, thank you, thank you. And the son looked at me and made eye contact, said, thank you very much. And I said, it's my pleasure. Because the woman was wearing a full headscarf and a long dress. And the young man probably looked like Jesus did. back in the Holy Land, eons ago. And we understood, I could feel the energy pass through the three of us. We knew exactly what we were doing. We were respecting one another as human beings. Not immediately going, oh, God, which is known as muttering in the sight of God. That's what we called it in Bible class. And we still mutter today in the sight of God, friends. Yes, we do. And I got my coffee. And I got up to the cash desk and started digging for my wallet and went, where's my phone? I can't. It's out of my pocket. It's in my pants pocket. It's on the jacket pocket. It's out of my purse. Oh my God, where did I leave my phone? So I got out of line, went back to the car, opened the car door, and there it was on the floor. It had fallen out of my pocket. Do you ever want to see anybody do a gratitude dance in the parking lot in front of a Panera? Thank you, God. Went back, got into line, got my coffee, got my little quiche thing, sat down, ate it. And then I realized that it was an example of gratitude as a two-edged sword. It can be used to wound or injure, or it can be used to bless, to appreciate, to respect. When we look at someone, and you know who I really do this to all the time? Okay, I shouldn't say all the time because I don't do it all the time because, my God, if I lived in McDonald's, that would be a very bad experience. But whenever I go through the drive-up, I mean, that's got to be a difficult position, folks. And the other day I went through, I was starving, and I thought, I don't want to have to go home and start making something. I'm just going to get the McDouble from the dollar menu. The sweet person took my order. When I got to the window, she smiled. Folks, you didn't want her to get near a magnet. She had so many braces on. It was unbelievable. She took my money. She gave me my change. And I said, you know what? You have an absolutely beautiful smile, even with all those braces. She looked in that second like she'd stuck her finger into an electric socket. She lit up. And she went, oh, thank you. And I said, keep smiling, honey. And I drove on. Friends, when we live in the conscious awareness that we are the individualized expression of the presence of God, it comes like that. We don't have to work at it. We don't have to wake up in the morning and go, okay, what am I going to do today to be God? You know, I say this all the time. Some of you think I'm nuts. I'm not. You get in the bathroom in the morning. I did look better this morning when I got in the mirror. I mean, I don't know what happened to this hair. And I went, good morning, God. What are we going to do today? Not knowing, you know, that an entirely different sermon was going to unfold as I was driving down the highway. So the first power that we need to use in this gratitude world, in this world of living a consciousness of gratitude, which, as I said, was understanding that God stands under all. And the second power is wisdom. For if God is standing under all and inhering in us, what do we have? We have access to the infinite wisdom. Now, that's a tough one, friends, because for most of our lives, in many of our situations, some people out there have been telling us how dumb we are. It starts really early. In the high chair, on the potty. How far back do we have to go? And it keeps going, and you get into school. And I remember somebody whose husband said when he was 16, his teacher said to him, well, you know what, if I were you, I would just take a shop course and go work in a factory somewhere. No, he became a very successful executive in the IT world. And I could rattle off the names of several other people who had similar experiences. You all know Les Brown, whose mother was told he was educably retarded. He became one of the best public speakers in the Detroit metro area and a huge success. And it goes on and on and on. The statement I read this morning, because I read it last night and I wanted to read it again this morning, was in a book by Neville Goddard, who said, your consciousness is the consciousness of God. I'm going to say it again. Yours, hers, mine is the consciousness of God, not the limited consciousness that someone else has told us we have. It doesn't depend on your IQ. It doesn't depend on your level of education. It is the consciousness of God. And when we can understand that, if it's true for me, it's true for everyone else. Okay, that doesn't explain people who hold opinions that seem erroneous to those of us who don't agree with them. I put that as politely as I could. But it does enable us. It does enable us to see differently. One of the things that made me think of when I started to tell you about was the experience of Jesus and Mary at the wedding feast at Cana. We all know that story. What happens? Mom looks at her son and goes, they're out of wine. And he gives her a snarky answer and goes, yeah, so what do you want me to do? This is the gospel according to Reverend Linda. So what do you want me to do? She gives him a mom look. And the thing is, Jesus sits there and he doesn't have a yellow armband on his wrist that says, what would Jesus do? He has within him the knowledge of who he is and said, what would God do? So he pauses for a moment. And you know where in scripture it always says, and he lifted his eyes? That's like, yeah. And the answer comes, fix it. And he does. Through the power that he has, he transforms plain ordinary water into, I don't know, Chateauneuf du Pape or Sauvignon Blanc or whatever they were drinking back in those days. And the joyful experience of the wedding within the community is allowed to, it is enhanced in its continuation. Can we not do that, friends? Can we not uplift other people? Especially, I really, this has changed my entire perception of Leona Helmsley. Anybody remember who Leona Helmsley is? Yes, the very, very rich lady who owned a hotel and had a very snarky attitude about the little people. She didn't think they were worth the time of day. Friends, our greatest use of our two-edged sword is for the little people, the people in the drudge jobs, the people behind the till at the gas station that looks like a hole in the wall. Because it's a no-name brand, but it's got the best price in town. And I go all the time. And I always, whoever is behind that glass screen, I go, thanks, have a good day. What does it cost? Nothing. Why? Because it is not I, but the Father within who does the work. We are here to be an expression, not just a concept, an expression of God. So what do we need? Well, we have understanding. We understand that we have access to the wisdom. Friends, you're going to be surprised. Do you have imagination? Yes, and that is one of the 12 powers. Imagination. Imagine that. Whatever it is we imagine, it can be brought forth. As I was thinking of, as I was driving along at 75 miles an hour, reading these signs and listening to this whole new sermon within me, I passed the exit for Telegraph Road, and I thought, yeah, I could reinvent the telegraph. And I went, no, Samuel F. P. Morse did that already. That one's finished. Obviously, I have something else to do with my imagination. And I kept on going. Imagination, friends, imagination. Can we see it other than it appears to be? What do we say? What is one of our principles in unity? Judge not by appearances. What is this? You know what this looks like? This looks like a paper cup with plain water in it. But if we were in a desert and this was what we had, it would be a life-saving gift. And it tastes pretty good too. I have two more stories to tell you. Do you remember the Sunday that I did the talk entitled, When Falling Leaves Drift by My Window? Do they fall by accident or do they fall on purpose? And the point that I made was, if the leaves did not fall off the trees in autumn, there would be no way for the new bud to come forward in the spring. That, friends, is a way to look at our experiences in life. Some of them are like the leaves falling off the tree. But what happens when the leaves fall off the tree? It makes space within us for the new bud to appear. Are we not always in a state of spiritual evolution? Yes. Yes. We can either resist it or not. I have another story I want to tell you. I hope I can get through this one because I cried the first time I heard it and I cried the second time I read it. And when you're driving and tears are running down your face, you know, especially if you're on a highway, it's a little tricky. This was on NPR. And there was a young lady who was talking about the time that she was talking about the time that she was stopped on the street by a street person who asked her for money. And she was in a very hard place in her life, financially, emotionally, etc. And she didn't just keep walking. She mouthed off to him. In effect, she said something like, why that HEWL should I even give you anything? Gave him a dirty look and walked into the Whole Foods supermarket where she was going in the first place. I like to think that Holy Spirit was at work, because as she pushed her cart up and down, she began to feel stirrings of compassion, stirrings of awareness. And she thought, who am I? What have I done? Oh my goodness. She left her cart. She ran out half a block away to hoping that the man was still there. And she reached into her coat pocket, which had a handful of change. She really was in a financially stressed situation. She went up to him, took the handful of change out of her pocket, put it into his hand and said, I'm so sorry. And she made a profuse apology. And then she started to, and I'm in such a tough place, and then she started crying. But what did the man do? He took her hand in both of his hands, and they were rough and dry and calloused and a little dirty. And he looked at her and said, it'll be okay. Spirit, my friends, it enables us to see beyond appearances. Each one of us is endowed with understanding, wisdom, and imagination. We have the opportunity to be an individualized expression of God every single day. I gave you homework last week. No, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands as who did their homework or who didn't do their homework. You had to say thank you to 3 people while looking them in the eyes. And I did give you a pass and told you that those of you who lived alone could say thank you to your cat or your dog or your bird. That counted as 1. But you had to find 2 others, which in some interaction enabled you to say thank you. And no, I'm not going to take a survey of who did and who didn't. But I would exhort you, yes, exhort you, not just invite you, but exhort you to do it through the rest of this month. 3 times a day between now, April, let's see, 30 days in September, April, June, November. Okay, until November 30th, you have to say thank you 3 times for something to someone. I assure you, I promise you, or I will buy you a cup of coffee at Panera. Okay, I'm not going to lose. I know this stuff works. So, I mean, I should probably say I'll buy you, lunch, but I'm not going to. It will change your perspective. It will change your perspective. And is that not what we are here to be? But the perspective of all that is good, all that is God, all that is love, all that is peace. I love this month of November. And I don't know who thought of putting Thanksgiving on the last Thursday of the month. It's some government agency or something, or some president. Somebody look it up on Google and let me know the next time I see you. But it brings us to a conclusion. It's not about the turkey. It's not about the mashed potatoes. It's not about the new vegan turkey ball, which isn't bad, actually. It's about a consciousness as a community of gratitude. I know in my talk last Sunday, we were listing some of the things for which we are grateful, and I said elections and then glossed over them quickly because elections are a sticky issue, folks. But I reminded you that those people whom we honored yesterday, many gave their lives and gave their souls that we have elections because we have freedom to make choices. So one of the choices that we can make is to be people of gratitude and to wield the 2-edged sword to uplift, to grant life, or to destroy. I invite you to think about what choice you will make as we prepare for our time of meditation.